All right, let's get our workshop going. We'll swap up the music here. We'll play something a little atmospheric. We're talking about magic systems and fantasy worlds. We'll get something vaguely Middle-earthian playing in the background. Very legally distinct. Very legally distinct Middle-earthian. Now, where we are going to pick up after last night's conversations, well, I'm going to end up needing your all's help to determine the type of world we're going to build in our world. Now that we have set a foundation of expectations, considerations, we've referenced ideas, and we've backed them up. So, as a brief overview, we went over 18 fantasy subgenres, and this is going to be a question I'm going to be asking you in chat. Which type of a world would you all like to develop in this exercise? How would you like to see a world developed? How would, which kind of a world? But we're not at the point yet of fully considering things that can go into them. But we talked about 18 common ones, Goblin of Gygaxanor. Because there's other things, too, where there was just steampunk fantasy. Though, of course, this can break into any kind of punk. Diesel punk, hex punk, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, and if you wanted to combine something and have grim dark fairy tales, with modern sensibilities, that's honestly just what was common Grimm's fairy tales. If you read them, historically, then there's a lot of modern pearl clutching at. There's a lot of modern pearl clutching at cartoons and songs that are 10, 20 years old. Let alone what were in fairy tales. But yes, I'm going to want your all's help in determining which kind of a world we're going to build together. So we reviewed this. We went over, it wasn't an exhaustive list, but ideas for types of magic systems. There were 9 presented, and each have their own sub-considerations or subcategories. We went over concepts of hard and soft magic, and we did go into, well, if you play D&D vanilla straight out of the player's handbook, it is a hard magic system. You know every spell. You know how every spell is cast. You know how to wield the spells. Your character might pretend not to in the moment, but it is something that is a comfortable part of the world. It is a tool to be used, like a box cutter when you're cutting a box, or a tape measure when you're measuring tape. In this case, Fireball helps to clean rooms, and it's effectively another tool in your belt to use. It's common, it's accepted in vanilla standard D&D, right? So we went over the concept of hard magic and soft magic, and this is something else I want your all's opinion about forming. Tensor's floating box cutter. I think that's a spell that we can have manifest. Now, some people might call that spiritual weapon, because for many people in retail, this is a spiritual weapon. This is part of your heart and soul of your business. But yes, and we touched on some other topics as well. We then went into not just demographics broadly of players in different years, or of the hobby. This is from 2019. And while that's interesting, we presumably know that If you're going to be playing with your friends or family at the dinner table, you either know or you don't know and don't care gender, sexuality, that sort of stuff. Rather, what you would be considering when you're presenting any game, whether it's strangers at a convention or people that you've known for at least 10 years plus, would be, well, how many do I want humans in my world? What is an elf in my world? Do I allow for half-elves? If not for reasons like D&D doesn't want them because they're problematic to Wizards of the Coast, but instead maybe it is just something that there's just a human and an elf can try as much as they want, but it ain't happening. The results won't follow the actions that were happening before, if you get my drift. Do you want to allow Goliaths and Tabaxi in your world? These are official fantasy races in D&D. So are Tieflings in the player's handbook. Maybe your world doesn't have Tieflings at all. Or Tieflings are reserved for only NPCs for some reason. So we're looking at, we can consider out of character demographics in some way, but be more concerned about the world you are building. Who lives in it? Who populates it? Are warlocks a thing in your world? They don't have to be. Yeah, it's one of the core 12 classes in the Pahubba Hubba Hubba Hey. But maybe warlocks don't exist. Or they do, but you actually reflavor arcane warlocks to be divine sources of magic. Everything else is the same. You just reflavor that all of their magic is divine instead of arcane. That might almost have a negligible effect. You might even say, and because the warlock was originally considered to be an intelligence-based class, until it was changed over to charisma from the original 5th edition playtest feedback. Maybe in your world, warlocks are intelligence-based casters. Why not? Or depending on the patron, warlocks actually source their spells from any of the abilities. There's actually a patron for each ability. You're a warlock that can cast Fist because of your strength. Garaz says, I find it kind of surprising that not many people who cast Fireball not have it explode like a volcano when it comes to magic. You have more ways to use spells and flavor them. Yeah, you're encouraged to decorate your magic missiles in some way that you would like. So, different percentages for the things that you want or allow or have been discovered or, are known to your world. We are going to play around with this tool maybe tonight. We'll see if we get to it tonight. This is a way to play around with your D&D world demographics and see what having a rarity of a particular caster can cause in a fantasy world. Now, there's other presumptions we might just have to presume, or that we bake in, or we just have to realize we're going to have to hand wave or make up a way to account for it. But we can have a lot of fun with this as well. If are druids very common? Are the vast majority of casters in your world, primal magic, nature magic, druids, maybe rangers, if you're really feeling spicy? Maybe wizards. Maybe there's one wizard in your world. Hi, Debbie. Good to see ya. Then we touched on interesting stats about D&D players, although in particular, we wanted to get over to, tiers of play. How far do you want to take your story or allow the majority of growth in your world? do people in your world commonly reach level 20 if we're using D&D as a base? If you're using Daggerheart, how many people are level 10 in your world? If you're using 4th edition D&D, how many people are level 30 in your world? Because the majority of play, the sweet spot for D&D 5th edition, is between levels 1 and 10. After that, due to time commitments, attention spans, or the fact that things are powerful, but they can get really wobbly, especially as a caster. Maybe a lot of people just say, you know what, you're heroes of the realm at level 10, and I think that's good enough for us. We want to keep some greater mystery to the world, or we want to know that if the highest level adventurer is level 10, a CR 16 monster is an end game monster. Despite epic levels in 5th edition being from 17 through 20. That way there's always a higher challenge without it being a weird, ridiculous numbers game. Power creep and spectacle creep. But we did pop over to look at some stats from D&D Beyond. Take from any of this what you will. If you think that it's scientific or not, from an insular community or not, or biased in some way. People making characters in D&D Beyond are not representative of people who are making characters and playing them, so a lot of this could be theory crafting, which maybe is why we can see not flat, but it's not it's not a, well, humans are 80% and all the other races are sharing a 20% value. As you're muddling through character creation and such. But it went down here, talked about average current level of characters created, average age of characters created. Shows an interesting sweet spot for what players think is either they're younger and want to play an old, wise, you're nearing middle age, so you might as well be turning to dust character, or you might actually be on the verge of turning to dust and don't want to play an adventurer that has back problems like you might. Wispy Whiskers, hello. 1 to 10 campaigns are like reading light novels. 10 to 20 are like reading Kalevala. And that's and Kalevala was the that was the Icelandic mythology collection of stories, correct? Finnish. I'm all right. It shows my my cultural centrism here. It's Nordic. No, Finnish mythology. All right. I was close geographically, but hopefully you can forgive me for the mistake. And then, we talked about if you're building your world and concepts, well, what is the distribution of people? If you're running a feudal world, how many kings and royalty or high priests do you have to people who are farmers or something else in your world? How do you want to structure this? How do you want to balance out this hierarchy of needs? Because it can be tough to be the king and have time to make decisions when you're on the verge of starving and your people are dying out because you don't have a population replacing itself due to war, famine, being eaten by saber-toothed tigers, or something else. So, using, cavemen stereotypes, right? So, these are our initial considerations. And there are many variables. I don't want any of you to go, oh, I have to balance all this? I have to think about all this? No wonder I just want to run vanilla D&D straight out of the player's handbook. I don't want to have to think about the distribution of wizards in a in a post-medieval, pre-Renaissance, Eastern European, because you can get detailed like that if you wish. You don't have to. And I'm not going to take us that far, though I want to introduce the ideas because some of you might love thinking about this and wondering about how one variable can ripple through a society, especially when we bring fantasy into real-world concepts. And that's why we play these games. Escapism. We play it for the fantasy. Balto Finnick, to be precise. Estonians have similar mythology. Okay. The Estonian flag always stands out because their colors, I don't know if there's a flag that has those colors as well. Yeah, very cool colors, very muted, very like calming and peaceful flag, maybe, because unless I'm horribly misremembering, it's black, white, and blue. All right. So let's look at options. We talk about D&D. This can be system neutral in a way. We're going to open up. Wait a minute. What? Well, this can work. Though for this presentation window, I want the other one. Hold on. I'm fixing it live, everyone. There we go. All right, so if you're playing along at home, you can open up a system resource document in SRD. If you have the player's handbook, crack it open. If you don't have one, go to your friendly local game store and pick one up. They would be delighted to help you get into a hobby. Pardon. And we could do this with Pathfinder and a lot of other books. Most of us have met through D&D. We'll use it as a common language, but we can extrapolate the ideas into other systems. So, core rules. We talk about vanilla D&D. We know that we can go to a particular page and find our spells. What is a spell? Casting a spell, spell list, spell descriptions. If we go that far, whoops. There's the alarm spell, acid splash. This is why it's a hard magic system. Unless you explicitly deny its existence, we understand going into D&D that it's by default, it's a high fantasy world. All of these spells exist in different ways from different sources, and you cast them doing particular things. Now, all of these are variables that you can adjust. Maybe no spells in your world have verbal, somatic, or material components to them, because you want to treat spellcasters similarly to martial classes. Well, I guess in that case, martial classes have a somatic component to their attacks, but maybe you keep it that way. Or if you say, well, the balancing issue for magic is that many of them do require verbal components. You have to be able to speak. You can't necessarily speak. You can't normally speak underwater or in a vacuum. Or if someone needs to hear what you say to receive the benefit, that can be suppressed through magic or someone being deaf or something else. So there's built-in ways to possibly check or foil spells, as this is supernatural. This is something for nothing. You know, per the vanilla rules, yeah, there's kind of an exhaustion of your spell slots, but beyond just running out of spell slots, it's not like it takes a toll on you. You as the wizard are more vulnerable when you have no spells. You might travel with others, or you might save all your spells to just, you know, absolutely destroy the first thing you come across to set a precedent. That is adjusting for play, but we have this flavor of D&D from our player's handbook. Now, the player's handbook does offer some optional rules as well. If we get to chapter 5, in fact, let me get the page number. Sorry if that's, I hope that's not flashing for you all. I'm sorry, chapter 6, customization, multiclassing, and feats. Actually, that's on 163. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a moment. I referenced this last night. That the player's handbook has 4 official fantasy races. The other 5, you could argue that drow are an optional sub-race for elf. But when we get into after humans, hold on. After we finish those 4, we have some. They're in the core book. They're not broken by any means. In fact, some people will tell you that dragonborn are weak due to the way that their breath weapon is statted, or the fact that they don't have dark vision, or things along those lines. Yeah, scattered among the members of these more common races are the true exotics. A hulking dragonborn here, pushing his way through the crowd. A sly tiefling there, lurking in the shadows, with mischief in her eyes. A group of gnomes laughs as one of them activates a clever wooden toy. So it's not like these are broken, but you have your 4 core, you know, your very Tolkien style human, dwarf, elf, and halfling. And from there, you know, you can get a little bit more exotic to the concept of generic Western European fantasy stories. So they're optional. Just because it's in the player's handbook doesn't mean that you have to allow a player to play a dwarf or a tiefling. Or everyone, you might tell, this is a story of elves. I don't care which elf you roll, but everyone is an elf. And we're going to tell an elf story. Or in your world, there's only elves. And in that case, tieflings are just reskinned as an elf of a different variety. You might not have a tail or the horns. You get the abilities, the mechanics work, but you're described as just a different flavor of elf. In which case, haha, the elves have become as humans. So in your world, don't be afraid to think of this. Dwarves might not exist at all, and as much as a player of yours wants to play a dwarf, hopefully you're polite about it, or you might explain it in ways that won't spoil your story. You can reject dwarves in your world. Because we all know dwarves are the best to play. Come on. Your game's going to break if you allow for anything else. Alright, so Chapter 5 is equipment. Chapter 6, customization options. The combination of ability score, race, class, and background defines your character's capabilities in the game, and the personal details you create set your character apart from every other character. Even within your class and race, you have options to fine-tune what your character can do. But this chapter is for players who, with the DM's permission, want to go a step further. This chapter defines 2 optional sets of rules for customizing your character: multiclassing and feats. Multiclassing lets you combine classes together, and feats are special options you can choose instead of increasing your ability scores as you gain levels. Your DM decides whether these options are available in a campaign. So right from the get-go, and this, I wouldn't say it was pearl clutching, but the concept of feats being an optional rule in D&D, oh, gasp. What? You can play 5th edition and not need feats? Correct. They're fun, and some are, some are in a vacuum mechanically better than others, just like cantrips. I don't know if any of you have ever taken, what was it? True Strike. We were talking about the cantrip True Strike in a world where True Strike is the supreme cantrip. That world exists. That is a functional, sought-after, game-breaking cantrip. So even in the player's handbook here, can you be a multi-class character to combine Ranger and Paladin? Can you be a wizard warlock? Yeah, you have your main area of studies, but you have this entity over your shoulder that is whispering answers to the wizard school test that you shouldn't know, but your grades have significantly improved ever since you got that friend of yours. Mechanically, is multiclassing broken? It depends on the combo. There is the coffee lock, if you've not heard of that. Wispy Whiskers says, wood elves, high elves, smug elves, vanilla elves, edgy elves, getting seasick of elves, kitchen sink elves. Yeah. A meteorologist veterinarian. Yeah, there you go. Or you might say, why do I want to be a druid ranger? Why wouldn't you? You could do some interesting things as a druid ranger. So the math is there. Can it be exploited? Can you go up to CareOpt forums? That stands for character optimization, if you're not familiar. Yeah, you can. You can find wombo combos of, well, you know, this particular race and sub-race, and this class, subclass, multi-classed in here. And if you have this particular, artifact by level 3, then you can attack 60 times per turn for an average DPR, damage per round, of 11 billion, blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, you get into homebrew feats and things. But these are options. You don't have to play with them. You could be encouraged to. But especially if you want to run a very simple game, don't worry about feats. Keep it super basic vanilla D&D. You want a little bit more? You can splash these in and they'll work. Now, this concept is enhanced in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And while many of you might already be familiar with multiclassing, maybe some of you have run a multiclass character. And if you have, you're welcome to talk about him or her up here. Many of you might have already had a character with feats available. I mean, humans were high up on the list of statistics, not because they're exceptional, but because the variant human, and it's called variant human because you get a feat for starting, the presumption is everyone gets to play with feats. It just is, well, the presumption is, well, multiclassing's in the book, I should be able to multiclass. Tiefling's in the book, I should be able to be a multiclass tiefling that takes feats. You don't have to. You don't have to allow it in your world. It could be very simple, straightforward, or you could swap things out for homebrew that you made or you found elsewhere. Anyway, So this is an idea that's introduced in the player's handbook, which many more of you have read, have used, or have access to. Now, I'm going to bring up here, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's a lot more that you can do to take the ideas that we had discussed in the workshop and tones that you can find in the player's handbook and move forward from there. Just looking here at the contents, the big picture, gods of your world, mapping your campaigns, settlements, language, and dialects. These are good sections to read. I'm not going to worry about them right now. It's not that there's not good advice. There is. But we're not at a point for these concepts. We'll touch on them for sure. But if you come over to... The concept of renown is an optional rule to track on your character, renown with factions. In most D&D worlds, magic is natural but still wondrous and sometimes frightening. People everywhere know about magic, and most people see evidence of it at some point in their lives. It permeates the cosmos and moves through the ancient possessions of legendary heroes, the mysterious ruins of fallen empires, those touched by the gods, creatures born with supernatural power, and individuals who study the secrets of the multiverse. Histories and fireside tales are filled with the exploits of those who wield it. What normal folk know of magic depends on where they live and whether they know characters who practice magic. Citizens of an isolated hamlet might not have seen true magic used for generations and speak in whispers of the strange powers of the old hermit living in the nearby woods. In the city of Waterdeep, in the Forgotten Realms setting, the watchful order of magists and protectors is a guild of wizards. These arcanists wish to make wizardry more accessible so the order's members can profit from selling their services. Some D&D settings have more magic in them than others. On Athos, the harsh world of the Dark Sun setting, arcane magic is a hated practice that can drain life from the world. Much of Athos's magic lies in the hands of evildoers. Conversely, in the world of Eberron, magic is as commonplace as any other commodity. Mercantile houses sell magic items and services to anyone who can afford them. People purchase tickets to ride airships and trains propelled by elemental magic. Consider these questions when fitting magic into your world. Is some magic common? Is some socially unacceptable? Which magic is rare? How unusual are members of each spellcasting class? How common are those who can cast high-level spells? How rare are magic items, magical locations, and creatures that have supernatural powers? At what power level do these things go from everyday to exotic? How do authorities regulate and use magic? This is something that I will only speak for myself anecdotally. This is something that in most of the stories that I have played in, or maybe not run, because I do consider magic regulation in my world. How is magic regulated? If there are people who can cast magic, are there consequences to it? If not by scarcity, by legality, by force? These are all variables to measure, and there's no one correct answer. Just as there is no one best world in which to run an adventure. You'll have a ton of fun playing in Eberron. You'll have a ton of fun playing in Dark Sun, though they operate very differently. And in Dark Sun, there's no divine magic either. The gods are dead in Dark Sun. How do normal folks use magic and protect themselves from it? The answers to some questions suggest the answers to others. For example, if spellcasters of low-level spells are common, as in Eberron, then authorities and common folk are more likely to have access to and use the results of such spells. Buying commonplace magic isn't only possible, but also less expensive. People are more likely to keep well-known magic in mind and to protect against it, especially in risky situations. Some civilized areas might restrict or prohibit the use of magic. Spellcasting might be forbidden without a license or official permission. In such a place, magic items and continual magic effects are rare, with protections against magic being the exception. Some localities might prohibit specific spells. It could be a crime to cast any spells used to steal or swindle, such as those that bestow invisibility or produce illusions. Enchantments that charm or dominate others are readily outlawed since they rob their subjects of free will. Destructive spells are likewise prohibited, for obvious reasons. A local ruler could have a phobia about a specific effect or spell, such as shape-shifting effects if he or she were afraid of being impersonated, and enact a law restricting that type of magic. We get into the schools of magic. You can get into more about that here. Do you want teleportation circles? What about bringing back the dead? There's examples here as well. Advice on creating a campaign, we'll touch on that. But these are points, and if none of you have read the DMG, you might go, that's been in there the whole time? Yes. And it's in before the first 25 pages of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Yet, how many times has this ever come up or been a factor that you might have counters beyond hoping that your players will cooperate and not just fireball or magic missile everything in sight? Because the peasants are helpless, or there's no one who's ever more powerful than they are to enforce these effects. So there's charts here if you want a randomized help in getting a campaign going. But beyond the magical considerations, and it is absolutely possible to play and have fun in a low or no magic D&D setting. You just use the rules in martial classes. You can still have plenty of fun. Now, maybe not in a no magic, maybe in a low magic. If you want magical healing, then there's potions, but they have to be brewed. There's a wait time to it. Beyond natural healing, you can buy things that might be exceedingly rare, but can save your life. Think Miracle Max from Princess Bride. Something that is so simple as to bring back someone from the brink of death with 1 hit point. How common do you want that to be? Because ultimately that could go on to cheapen life in your world or to enhance some other aspect of it. Now, just as we have options in the player's handbook, things that you don't have to play with, but may. If we look at some things, I don't know if a lot of you have ever ran a poisoner style character in D&D. Or if you've ever used diseases that don't just have, I cast instant chickenpox and, deal necrotic damage or something. But things that take time and set in. And many of us may never play with poisons or diseases because magic is so ubiquitous that it renders these things why no one actually ever gets sick. No one ever actually unless it's a super strong acute poison, and we're presuming that come back to life spells are exceedingly rare or not accessible. What's the point in poisoning someone or afflicting disease on them if every day your cleric or paladin can just get rid of it? So it cheapens these aspects of storytelling or of danger. I am not going to. I am not going to touch on this third rail in the hobby section, but the same reason exists why would someone have a particular physical ailment as an adventurer. I'm going to leave it at that. If you want it to be compelling, make it compelling. Make it an interesting part of your world. But many of us, beyond just say, oh, you take 10 poison damage, it's nothing. It's reduced down to nothing more than a poison type. Or maybe in some other extrapolation, where you don't have ready access to spells or antidotes that are a dime a dozen in, the apothecary shop. Why being poisoned or diseased, if you have access to nothing else, it can increase tension. And you want to use that as a storytelling device to do just that. As something sets in, it's a ticking clock. But otherwise, how common, if not through expense, does something like Assassin's Blood or Midnight Tears or Serpent Venom or something else, how does that exist? Is it a type of magic or poison or substance that cannot be interacted with? Or that maybe magic actually has a specific timeline that it must be cast? All curative or restorative spells must be like, oh, why am I forgetting the name? What's the spell? It's a level 1. It acts like a defibrillator. In the first minute someone dies, you can bring them back. Maybe all magic is like that. And so if someone's poisoned and doesn't realize it until that window closes, revivify, thank you. Then poison or disease means something more. Or in a world where all of these cool cackle fever or sewer plague or sight rot exist, this is cool stuff, but in generic vanilla D&D world, you might as well not even interact with this or play with it, because your paladin is just gonna get rid of it. Your cleric or druid is just gonna get rid of it, or you're just gonna buy a potion to get rid of it because it's an inventory item in Chapter 5, or somewhere else in the DMG in the treasure section. But if something like this, truth serum, torpor, burnt othar fumes, or something like that, is interesting, if you want that to be a part of your world, the world has to support disease existing. If we go by vanilla player's handbook, D&D, then there should be no disease and no poison in the world, and no one should necessarily truly suffer from disability or other things like that, because you just get your spells back every day. Now, we're going to touch on an alternate rule that is going to make things like that more precious. It will be more scarce, and therefore the value of it will increase. I'm building up to it. All of this is leading somewhere. If you want impairment, if you want disability, if you want things to mean something, the world in which it is run, or the system that is in place, either through the system by the book that you're running from the get-go, or how you modify it from the book in your world, has to have this be a risk, something that's at stake, something that's compelling. Madness is something that is an alternate rule that you don't have to play with, but you can. How it sets in, curing madness as well, calm emotion spell. So again, this is an ailment that what level's calm emotions? That's a level 2 spell? Is that a level 1 spell? while lesser restoration can rid the character of short-term or long-term madness, depending on the source of the madness. Remove curse or dispel evil might also prove effective. A greater restoration spell or more powerful magic is required to rid a character of indefinite madness. And yet, because madness exists, we have all kinds of ways to address it. Now, it's not bad in some out-of-character term to say, well, all right, I can consider that and we can balance it, but if you want madness to be something that carries weight, how are you going to manage madness and incorporate it into the world and not treat it like a video game, like a being affected by roar in Pokemon? Oh, my attack goes down for a while and then I'm back to normal afterwards. Or falling asleep in Pokemon or something, right? Otherwise, these are cool concepts, but they're disposable because if you play by the book over here, there's so many other ways in the player's handbook that it's nothing more than an inconvenience for a while. Oh, wow. I looked into Infinity. Can I get a lesser resto, please? Cool, thanks. Oh, my arm. I only have one arm. Yeah. Oh, can I get a regen, please? Cool. Yeah, thank you. Yep. Yeah. Good as new. Don't. Yeah, I mean, look. I would have liked my pinky to be a little longer, but you know, any port in a storm. I got my arm back. These are things to consider. What is the weight that you want to put on your players or on the consequences of the world? What is the danger that you want to present? Aortic dissection would be a useful spell, says Goblin of Gygaxanor. Calm emotions is second level, says Garaz Fireaxe. I looked into Infinity. She looked back and told me I was wanting. Hi, Bane. And I'm sorry, I did miss a little bit in chat as well. Garaz also said I made a muscle bard character named Punkles the Clown, and he's just going to give bardic inspiration by pulverizing his enemies with an accordion. Goblin of Gygaxanor says everyone should have tetanus. Also, Belladonna joins us, as does Coffee Cat. So, hello, hi, howdy, welcome. Now, what are other ways, if you want to go from this vanilla D&D where, okay, so as much as I was talking about Daggerheart and saying, well, it's kind of like bumper bowling, right? Yeah, you're rolling a ball down, you're hitting the pins. Are there consequences? Is it too soft? If we go by just what's in the books, it's a pretty soft and easy system. It's not, I would say it's not as soft out of the book as Daggerheart. So it might be the difference between bumper bowling or getting to roll the ball 3 times per turn. And I'm not saying this I'm not slamming Daggerheart. I'm not owning Critical Role and Darrington Press. Daggerheart's its own thing. It's catering to a specific audience with its rules and the way that it's written. And it very much leans into all characters at level 1 are already heroes. You're heroes of the land. You don't have to die if you don't want to. You play to level 10, and there you go. It's kind of it's just a sweet spot of, look, you're on a bright path to adventure. Everything is shiny and new. The horizon is golden, and just get together, play, roll some dice, eat some Thai food, and have fun. And there you go. And so neither then is that saying that only true D&D is dark and gritty. Nothing like that either. But if you would like to take the concept of D&D and say, you know what, I do agree, having all the options presented does make my world low risk. It does make it so that no one really should ever be getting sick or hurt, or there's not necessarily consequences to actions. Oh no, Bane! Bane was bonked by the bot. Get back here, Stream Elements. Yeah, the .tv gotcha. What is Beacon TV, Bane? What is this a new streaming service, or what is this? Or did you mean Bacon TV, in which case sign me up? Gara says, yeah, Magic tends to really mitigate the issues, and it can be really cool for someone to find a way to grow and develop their character more. But that in a hard Magic setting, which by default, D&D is hard Magic. We know all the rules, and Magic is nothing more than a tool that is to be used, you know. So in this case, you know, disease is as common as a nail, and you get a hammer and you hit the nail. Oh no, I came down with cackling fever. All right, well, just have the cleric come by, and boop, there you go. I can do this several more times tomorrow also. Bane says, so they are broadcasting on Twitch and YouTube still, but they are now offering a premium streaming service that's all their own. Oh, is this for, okay, so like you can watch reruns of Critical Role or something on Beacon TV? Is that what this is? Okay. Ah, okay, so yeah, it's super brand new. All right. I don't know. Maybe they want to grow in that specialty. I mean, Twitch isn't known for tabletop role-playing games. And if they are, it's because of Critical Role. If Critical Role does its own thing, because you know they're going to move from D&D to Daggerheart, and you know that if they stop broadcasting on Twitch, there's not going to be a lot of people, not as many people anyway, drawn to this corner at Twitch. But maybe that means that they want to create a pure speculation or even hope. They want to create a platform for people who want to go and watch and engage with tabletop hobby stuff. More so than what Twitch offers. Maybe. I don't know, but we'll see, huh? We'll see. So anyway, what are ways that even D&D itself says, look, we get that the vanilla rules are there. It's meant to be simple. It's meant to be straightforward. You know, and the language is in there that just, you know, adopt what you want, change what you want. These are a big list of suggestions. Anyway, it's the Dungeon Master, as the Dungeon Master, you aren't limited by the rules of the player's handbook, the guidelines in this book, or the selection of monsters in the monster manual. You can let your imagination run wild. This chapter contains optional rules that you can use to customize your campaign, as well as guidelines on creating your own material, such as monsters and magic items. The options in this chapter relate, and I'm going to highlight this, the options in this chapter relate to many different parts of the game. Some of them are variants of rules, and others are entirely new rules. Each option represents a different genre, style of play, or both. Aha! So if none of you have read your Dungeon Master's Guide before, it's here. And you don't need to be embarrassed. A lot of people who've played D&D don't own a DMG and have never looked at it. And what I'm showing you, despite this being, you know, the DMG as per its release, and we're on 263 in the DMG, maybe you've never read through it this far, and you've never realized that even this is suggested in the D&D book as alternate ways to play. And that's fine. The options in this chapter relate to many... okay, yeah, there's that. Consider trying no more than one or two of the options at a time so that you can clearly assess their effects on your campaign before adding other options. Before you add a new rule to your campaign, ask yourself 2 questions. Will the rule improve the game? Will my players like it? These are 2 very good questions to ask. Now, ultimately, this comes down to facilitating communication, as tabletop role-playing games are games of communication. If you suddenly whip out a new rule that says fundamentally the nature of magic has shifted, and your level 10 wizard now no longer has access to these spells that you thought you had or already took because I decided they're too powerful right now and I'm going to take them away, that's poor communication. At least do it through story. At least, talk with the player, or give a little foresight before you start playing, into in this way. The players don't have to like everything that's presented, but that's why the communication beforehand is essential. To say, we are going to be playing a grim dark game. We're going to be playing a fairy tale style game. Some people want dark and horror. Some people want whimsy, and you're not worried about how many hit points you have so much as this is like playing Harvest Moon in D&D. You're in an enchanted kingdom, you meet weather spirits, you're playing Stardew Valley with D&D, which is, more like fairy tale stuff. If you want a little bit of both, I think that was Rune Factory that combined elements of Harvest Moon with fantasy adventure, where you had to, go into a cave, and there might have been a monster in the cave, but after you tamed the cave, you could grow mushrooms in it, and it became part of your farm or something like that. But that's where communication comes in handy, because not everyone wants to play through a horror game. Not everyone wants to play a Farmville D&D. And is what you're doing, is this reactionary and punitive, or is what you're doing going to enhance your game? Give it teeth, give it stakes, give it risk and consequence? Or is it just petty despotism that you're imposing? If you're confident that the answer to both questions is yes, then you'll have nothing to lose by giving it a try. Urge your players to provide feedback. If the rule or game element isn't functioning as intended or isn't adding much to your game, you can refine it or ditch it. No matter what a rule's source, a rule serves you, not the other way around. Beware of adding anything to your game that allows a character to concentrate on more than one effect at a time. Use more than one reaction or bonus action per round, or attune to more than 3 magic items at a time. Rules and game elements that override the rules for concentration, reactions, bonus actions, and magic item attunement can seriously unbalance or overcomplicate your game. This is true. There might be new DMs or storytellers out there who capitulate and say, well, I don't want to tell my friend no, and I'm sure that they'll use it responsibly. So yeah, we'll just say you can concentrate on 2 spells. Or I will give you 5 attunement magic items. And if everything else in your game is run out of the book isn't even generally balanced, as much as that concept exists, to have characters be able to do that. Now, if it plays into like power trip, power fantasy, if it plays into a weak will or capitulation to a player that is even manipulative or being a bully, there is this warning that, look, adding too much at any point in time can spoil it. Or this is a modular guideline set of rules for the system, though those right there, those are the support pillars for the game. Knock them down if you want. You can't come to us and say that we didn't warn you that the roof fell in on the campaign and that it is now an uninhabitable wasteland or something, right? Balance is an illusion told by the weak to try to hold back the strong, says Bane. I've got DMGs for almost all the other editions of D&D, but never picked up 5th. No idea why. Well then, Craigar, I'm reading it to you for the first time, and hopefully this is delighting you to learn that this information has been here the whole time. All right. So with this review, we had our warm-up, our primer for tonight. Let's take a quick break. I'm gonna stretch. I've had my root beer. Okay. Let's get up and stretch, walk, get the circulatory system going. And when we come back in 5-ish minutes or so, let's look into these rules and discuss them. See how they might affect the themes that we had talked about, the subgenres of fantasy, and move in this direction. Because sometimes just changing one little thing can have a big effect on a game. And you can run all but vanilla D&D. This one trick has DMs furious. Come back after the break to find out what it is.